It's Friday 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let me get set up here. So, since it is Friday, we like to talk. We being me, mostly me. But as I'm doing this every week, I have more and more people who are able to tune in. 10 o'clock for me is definitely more of a selfish time. This is a live, it's a Q&A period for people, but right now this is what my schedule is allowing. So people who are able to get here, it's so cool. So as I build people to come in the room, I'm going to do kind of like put my information out there first and then leave the Q&A for after, which it can be on topic or it can just be, I'm opening myself up to like, where are you at in your journey? Where and what kind of insight or guidance do you need to be able to continue on? Because the thing is like getting started is one thing, then you've got the process of maintaining the journey, right? And so as a therapist and having done my own work and helping other people do that work, I feel like this is I want this space to be something that a lot of people can use. So what we're talking about today though is a little controversial, but not really. Like we do it all the time, but it's been a theme of a lot of my sessions this week, and I think it's a really important point for us to be talking about when it comes to intentionality, and that's confrontation culture, right? I think there's a lot of things to be said, but what my goal here, right, is when I work with people is to not only help them process through things that they just maybe can't figure out on their own, and getting through them and becoming the let it go concept, but it's also to figure out how to bridge that gap into either stagnancy into wow, it just started pouring. Sorry, attention. Stagnancy into momentum or, hitting barriers along the way. And I call them certain levels. There's, once you start gaining that momentum, you start having a lot of just confrontation within your own life. It doesn't have to just be with people. And this is where it gets a little bit messy. Like, let's break down what actually goes into confrontation. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that I feel like are really important points along the way to get yourself out of a situation where maybe you're being confronted or you have to confront someone. We'll say a lot of people come to therapy because they've been confronted with a lot of certain uncomfortable parts of information about their life, or they've been confronted. People have a lot of history of bullying and trauma around being confronted by someone else's unhealthy or hurt presence. And that can be tricky sometimes. So I really kind of want to unpack that a little bit because confrontation is a natural part of life. We not only have to know how to deal with confrontation, but we have to know how to do confrontation in an effective way. And I'm just going to be honest with y'all. As a therapist who receives a lot of people who've been confronted, I think we could do better. I'm watching not only just even myself confront other people, and there's a lot of reactivity these days. And now for me, given that I work in the mental health field, I do this, more consistently. I don't really think that's much of an excuse because the general population, y'all deal with each other all the freaking time. I'm one-on-one. So it's like to not realize how you're feeding into all of the reactivity is where I really just want y'all to just kind of think for a second. Where do you have your snags within how you get confronted by everything else going on? And I think the first key point that I really want to make here is when you take that moment to stop, take that moment to also figure out how can you be more intentional. And the first thing that comes to what you have control over is the way that you communicate. And so we got to do better. And from what I've just observed from a one-on-one standpoint to being out in general public, watching people, because People watching is my favorite hobby, y'all. I literally, if you ever see me out in public, I have my sunglasses on, one, because they're prescription and I don't always like to wear my contacts, and I didn't actually have contacts for a while, but also because people don't like to be stared at. I get that. Like the whole psychoanalyze thing, I get it, right? I don't like to be stared at. I'd rather just take a picture, right? So I sit there and I just watch people, and I watch not only the verbal communication, but the nonverbal communication between dyads, between triads, between groups of people. And I also do that for a living. I just, like, I'm a nerd, okay? I have no shame about it. But when you're coming into a situation where you know you have to confront someone, my first recommendation is to always know your predominant, what's your strength going to be. And when it comes to your communication style, that is a strength that I encourage anyone to know what's your predominant communication style. So I'm going to use myself as an example. I came from a very passive aggressive communication style. I'm sarcastic. I like to do it because I'm witty. But before I learned how to communicate effectively, I was the unhealthy version of passive aggressive because I was so consumed by my own reaction to things and unaware of my reaction to not only just the situation, but sometimes it wasn't even about the situation. Sometimes I was just hungry. And if you're anyone in my circle, you know, if Sarah's hungry, it's just not productive. It's not productive. It's just not. So, or if you're tired, right? Like we have this this constant state of denial for our own needs sometimes of like, yo, I'm tired, but we keep pushing through doing things that require a lot of energy, like communication and confrontation. So I had to take a hard look at like, okay, I'm a natural passive aggressive communicator. I get nervous. I don't really know why, but I just do. So that kind of leads into my second point of when you're trying to do effective confrontation, you need to be intentional about setting the tone. There's this big lot of culture out there right now that's like, oh, I'm going to match your energy. I'm going to come at you the way you come at me. Okay, try that and tell me how it works. Because as a therapist, if I matched my client's energy, I would be a shitty therapist because we would not get any damn where. We wouldn't. That's just my take on it. I believe in setting the tone. Not to get too clinical on you, but like just as something to keep y'all aware of. One of the biggest skills, roles, jobs, what I do is I mirror people. So I kind of match energy, but then I become intentional with it because I can actually change and set the tone of how that person regulates throughout what they're processing. And so that's when we mirror, it's not just matching their energy, right? Like you can take it literally as like, oh, I see myself in this mirror right now, this camera, and I can focus on matching the energy, or I can focus on setting the tone. I'm always going to advocate for people setting the tone because it requires more intention than matching the energy, because you're already going to do that. If I match the energy of my clients, we would just be talking like this all the time. And I don't know about you, but that's not interesting. So, and I don't want to go to therapy with a therapist that just matches my own energy. Now that's the type of therapist I am. I can't speak to other therapists and what they do. I can speak to a couple of other therapists and what they do because I have supervised them or I've been involved in their practices, and I know they don't do that. So I know it's not everyone, but if you're going to a therapist that is just matching your energy and you're like, can we get somewhere, then you may not be with the right therapist. That's for therapy. But let's go back to the general confrontation culture, because right now we're in this, what's it called? Cancel culture. Cancel culture is, I'm not going to debate that. First of all, I've got no one to debate with, but cancel culture is going to be a catastrophe. I promise that that's just my opinion. It's going to end up becoming a bigger problem than it's short term versus long term, in my opinion. And confrontation culture is a short term and long term versus canceling. You lose, like if you were to block someone, right, that pisses you off, you block someone, you're also blocking yourself and locking yourself in with that particular emotion, with that situation. And yes, you can always unblock them, but then what's the point of blocking them in the first place? You're using energy to keep someone out and versus learn the skill of how you confront first and foremost yourself, figuring out how it is that you feel about it, de-escalating how you feel so you can figure out what you want to do about it, and then be able to actually effectively communicate and confront the situation. Just get it done. Because if you don't do it now, it's going to come back around at some point and you're going to have to confront it then. Now, some things have to work that way. You can't force a situation to and confront the situation. You could make it worse. But in that period of time away, I highly recommend that you work on how to be prepared for that confrontation. So how you do that, one of it's a think acronym. Of course, I didn't pull it up. I'll post it. Actually, let me pull it up real quick. Because this is a tool that I use for people, and you've probably seen this before, but I'm going to bring it back up because, to be honest with you, sometimes I just don't remember like the lessons from school. Like sometimes someone schooled me the other day on the lactate. I was like, I say this all the time. Of course it's sucrose and all the sugars versus proteins. I'm 10 years out of grad school, y'all. Sometimes I just need a refresher. So let's take a look at what this think acronym, if you guys are already, ahead of me here. So you should be able, okay, yeah. So can we make it any bigger? There we go. So think before you speak, right? So this is a really good tool. And okay, there we go. Figuring out this whole like streaming platform. If you think before you speak, which is a step in itself, but hey, we're going to just work on where we're at. This is a really good tool to kind of, or a guide to figure out whether it is something, a confrontation is something that you should do, right? So most of the time when I walk my clients through this, we don't get past one of the letters. And if you can't really get past one of the letters, then you probably don't need to confront the situation and you really just need to work and process it yourself. But think about whether or not it's true and whose truth is it? Is it your truth that you have to discuss or confront, or is it the other person's truth? And is the feedback, or if it's a feedback situation, is it true, like, or is it only your perception? Just because your truth may not apply to everyone else's truth, right? Is it going to be helpful? This is a big pet peeve of mine, which it's just going to happen in life, so I'll get over it. But is when you bring a problem to someone without any kind of suggestion or solution to break. So you're really just, this comes off mostly as a critique, and it's like, oh, you what are you going to do about that? And like, okay, well, I don't know, but do you have any suggestion? Like, go ahead and try to provide the solution, because if not, you're just like, what's the point of saying something, right? So is it going to be helpful? Is it helping? And I've been just as guilty of doing something that's unhelpful too, because it was something that I didn't use this acronym. Like maybe it was because I was pressured in the moment, or I felt pressured in the moment, and I didn't use this, right? Like, we're going to make mistakes. That's okay. But when you redirect and you recorrect, come back to this acronym and like really use it as a guide. Is it inspiring? Now, not every confrontation is meant to inspire people, but you're having a transaction with someone at that given moment in time. So why not inspire them to keep going? Why would you want to pull them back? Clearly, bullies don't use this acronym. So if you've been bullied, you're now responsible for having to use this, because they've just transferred that energy to you, and you may be bullying yourself now because you now have the experience of being bullied and you're not inspired. They did not inspire you to go do great things. They inspired you to feel like shit about yourself, right? So don't be the bully and keep going on. This tool in itself can stop that process. Is it necessary? Really? Like, you know, some people, again, this is going to be a very subjective particular point, but what will necessary look like? How will, if you send this piece of information to a person, what and how is it going to benefit them? How can do they really need to know about it? And whether or not it's kind as well. So that's just a really cool guide that I like to use with people. It does seem kind of elementary in a way, but we complicate things way too much in society today. Keep it simple. Go back to the tools that we use, not only just in therapy, but go back to the tools that you've at one point learned and really try to have them guide you and ground you. These are really good for people who struggle with inattentiveness and anxiety and depression, because that focus and attention to the chaos of a confrontation in itself is a trigger. It's a stressor. So using these tools along the way, and you can find these tools in my app, by the way. I'll just go ahead and do that shout out there and put this little notification up. My app is launched. I haven't marketed it yet, but there is a free resource library that has all of these tools centralized in one location. And so you can go download it in the Apple or Google Play Store. It's also on my website, and we have a web version and a phone version, so it can pretty much go anywhere with you, and tablet. I have it on my tablet. So it makes those resources a little bit more accessible and reasonable for you to use when you're thinking about what you do have to confront someone with or yourself about. So that's kind of one big point of know your communication style, know your strengths and how you're going to go into the situation, because your communication style is completely dependent on your stress response. So this is kind of setting the tone of what it is that you want is going to kind of address the stress response too. Your stress response is naturally going to hijack your logical thinking. That is what our bodies are, and our brains, they're not really comparable. They don't do the same things. They complement each other, but they do not work together well unless we are intentional about it. So when you get into a stressful situation, I'm pretty sure everyone has heard it, but if you haven't, the stress response is fight, flight, or freeze. And you're not really given a choice at birth sometimes which one and which response you're going to have. Me personally, I go to the flight and freeze. Excuse me, I almost lost mostly freeze, but a lot of flight, because it's really uncomfortable. Having grown up and dealt with conflict that I had no control over, I was just like, I'm out. I don't do it. I was conflict avoidant and I still don't prefer conflict, but I had trained myself differently. So this is very possible, but it does take a lot of work. This is also what therapy does, is that you train your stress response to do something different. If it's not working for you, start finding a way to make it work for you. And this is vital in pretty much anything in life, whether you're trying to move up in your job, in your career. If you work for yourself, it is essential. Like, this is why I'm really passionate now, going in with providers who want to make the cross into entrepreneurship, especially in healthcare, is because we need to be very aware of who the service is. I am my own business. So if I do not have a good understanding of what runs the business, this thing, then I am not going to be as successful, and I'm going to become stagnant. I'm going to plateau. I'm going to hit I'm not going to do well. I'm going to be, that's another story for another time. So when you become aware of your fight or flight or freeze response, this is how you can also determine how you want to set the tone. What is the outcome that you're going for this confrontation? How do you visualize yourself showing up? I don't care how you do it, but set the tone for how you're going to show up and what this particular confrontation is going to be. Then my last point here is act in courage and not confidence. When you are retraining yourself to have a different stress response. You are going to be scared. It's a stress response. Even a fight mode is, and I can argue that it is rooted in fear because it is stress. It is a survival mechanism. It is a threat to your existence. And you start off the situation in a reactive mode. And so the likelihood of you being confident dwindles just because of the stress response. So I encourage courage over confidence, because you can tap. That's part of setting the tone. So if you've done the other two steps and you're already looking at confrontation, first of all, you're already courageous. So you've just gone and done 3 different steps that reinforce being courageous enough to look at what you need to do to become more confident in confrontation. But you're not always going to feel confident. You're not always going to look confident. There was one time, man, I had to fire someone. And if he was watching this, I had to fire my own friend. I cried as I fired someone, let alone, and thank God it was a friend of mine because they were understanding, but I had never done that before. I was not confident with it, but I was courageous enough. I had enough of the insight and where I was at that point in time where I could show up in a courageous way. I wasn't showing up in a confident way. I'm cool with that because I at least did it. And to this day, the person and I were still very good friends. Our communication was open because I had already worked on being more of an assertive communicator. I also encourage vulnerability within our and expressive communication and being transparent. That just not just telling the truth, but being open and honest and willing to be in a place of discomfort with the process brings courage to action. That's how you act in courage. So that's my little spiel for you today about how this confrontation culture could really improve. Y'all, it's getting messy out there. We are not only, I don't even want to speak to the violence that's happening because that's out of the realm of confrontation that I'm talking about, first of all. Now, this is probably a good point if I didn't say it at the beginning, is confrontation is going to likely happen in a dyad, so 2 people. And it's going to be more on your home front. And it can sometimes present as an aggressive situation to you, but it's not ever I'm not talking about a situation where there's violence involved. Now, it can graduate up until if you're dealing with a bully or if your child's dealing with a bully. Matching that energy is one thing, right? Like if you just do it back, but if you show up matching the energy to set the tone because you actually showed up courageously to be like, you know what? Bullies don't ever expect you to actually stand up to them. And it usually stops after that. And that's where your confrontation comes in. If you're willing to confront it, it's likely not going to continue and it's going to disperse. So this is what I challenge you guys to do. And one is figure out your communication style. And I have some resources of that on the app. So if you guys want that, drop a comment on this live and I can send you the link, or you can go to the app and find it yourself. But know your communication style. And then I want you to ask yourself, if you've been bullied, are you the bully? Whether it's to yourself or because if you're bullying yourself because someone else bullied you, then more than likely you're bullying other people. You are the person that people need to confront, which is why you're being confronted, why they're telling you maybe you need to go to therapy, because there's this energy about you that it's aggressive. Now, I'm not saying believe everything that they say, but if they're saying it, they're probably saying it for a reason. You got to figure out if that reason is because it's true or if it's true for them. We never really know whose stuff is what. So don't just pick up anyone's stuff that they're telling you, but don't disregard it either. Because when you deny that, you deny your own existence, you're going to deny the existence of other people. You become the bully because someone denied your existence at some point. You can stop that process right now. You can, whether it's reaching out to me or just listening to this live and using the resources on your own. You don't have to go out there and this is literally where all of the violence that we've been seeing in today's society starts, is right here at this point of confrontation. Are you willing to confront yourself? Are you willing to confront the person who's confronted you at some point and address that, so you don't have to continue putting out that passive energy towards other people, because you never know who you're actually bullying. Story for you, because I have been the bully. I wasn't super bullied in school by other people, but it was the right combination of experiences for me that I received a lot of, like, I started becoming my own bully. And I also had I just had a lot of insecurities, a lot of unhealthy ways of understanding who I was and what I was worth. And so you flash forward into my adult life, young adult life, and this was actually, it's been part of my journey. I've had significant friendships that have had confrontations in them and they have not gone well. And there was one that I was the bully and I had no idea that I was the bully. I had no idea because they never confronted me about it. They never, or if they did, I was in denial until I was willing to confront myself. And that's when, I'm not saying that I get a pass for what happened before 2017, because I don't. I believe in personal accountability. But if I didn't know what I knew then, if I didn't know what I know now, I would not know what I knew. Did I mess that? I think I messed that up still. My point being, I did not know what their experience was when I was in that moment with them. And if they had confronted me, it could have been a situation where I could have done better and it could have turned out differently and no one would have had to get hurt or gotten hurt. But I don't have the ability to go back and change the past. I can only make the corrections and move towards a better version of myself. But then there's also situations where I know I was coming off as the bully and I still had no control over that person perceiving that I was a bully. That's a tough one. And that's why you should go to therapy, because you can't figure that shit out on your own all the time. Because if you completely disregard that experience, you'll miss the fact that maybe there was something I could have done differently. Maybe there was something that I could have approached differently, but then also maybe the situation was really just out of my control. Someone else's reaction and perception is not my responsibility. It's not something that I can control. I can only allow myself the room to grow each and every second after that interaction. We have to open ourselves up to that confrontation of our own reality as it comes, and not just stick to the reality that feels comfortable. So I hope you guys enjoy that, brief little rant on confrontation and what it's going to take for us to get into this, connect better, communicate better, confront better. We don't have to keep doing this where we just I got to say what I got to say, or I'm going to cancel this person. You can do it if you really want to. I am just here to let you know it is not as effective as you really think it is. It's not. So I hope you guys have a good Friday. It doesn't look like I have any questions in the chat right now, but I look forward to anyone's comments and just connections moving forward. And you guys have a great weekend. Happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I will see you next week for How to Learn a Transformation.